What the fox is up, all you internet junkies? I am the Facts Fox, and on this episode, are you drinking a Pepsi right now? You might want to put that bad boy down until we find out if a batch of Pepsi got HIV infected blood in it. Did you hear the one about the 16 Japanese whalers? They were all eaten by a pod of ravenous killer whales. And do you know what to do if you're all alone and having a heart attack? It might be a thing called cough CPR. Or it might not. Join me as I follow these stories down the rabbit hole. Alright, Fox fans, here we are, back at the Facts Fox desk for episode 2 of What the Fox. Before I get started, I just want to say thanks to everyone who put their paws on that subscribe button and subscribed to the Facts Fox channel. I also want to take the time to thank everyone who watched the first episode. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you all came back to watch episode number 2. The other thing I want to tell you about is that I got rid of the browser overlay that I had in episode number 1. Instead, I'll have the browser up in this corner so that we have a little bit more face-to-face time, and I feel like I can connect with you, the audience, a little bit more. Okay, with that said, let's jump into the first story. Did a batch of Pepsi get contaminated with HIV-infected blood? Okay, so this is an oldie but a goodie. It still flies around the internet to this day and has different versions and variations that have come out in the time since its original launch, which is actually 2004, when HIV-infected blood scare took place in a restaurant ketchup dispenser. We then saw the hoax again in 2005, 2006 with canned pineapple. And then finally, in 2011, we have the version that I'm talking about today, which is the Pepsi product with HIV-infected blood in it. Another version of this that came out more recently was the fruity version. If you don't know what fruity is, it's a very popular drink in India. In this case, the story referred to mango fruity, I believe, in specific. If you're from India, then you probably remember this story because it's not that long ago, as recent as 2014. So the claim is that a worker, I'm guessing disgruntled, injected his HIV-infected blood into a batch of Pepsi product. Now, this sounds absolutely horrifying right off the bat. I can't even imagine slamming back a Pepsi and then hearing this kind of news. And if I found out it was real, I would fall apart. Luckily, I personally don't drink any kind of pop products, so it's not a concern for me, but it might be a concern for you. Now, as I previously mentioned, this story has been around for several years, originating in 2004 with ketchup. In 2011, it became a Pepsi product. In 2014, it was fruity. And in 2017, we still see the Pepsi, and now Coca-Cola has joined the game as well. So the first iteration of this from 2011 would have been in a social media post or an email, and it would have sounded something like this. I'm hearing that someone with HIV at a Pepsi plant has injected their blood into the product during plant production. Is this true? Why would they still be selling the product? But some people are saying the news said to not drink it right now. Another variation that was seen in 2012, urgent news. There's news from the police. It's an urgent message for all. For the next few days, don't drink any product from Pepsi companies, like Pepsi, Tropicana Juice, Slice, 7-Up, etc. A worker from the company has added his blood contaminated with AIDS. Watch NDTV. Please forward this to everyone on your list. Now, NDTV is an Indian TV network that has live broadcasts online. It apparently featured this story at some point in time, but it can no longer be found on their site now. And if you're from India, you'll recognize the 2014 version of this scam. Don't drink mango fruity. The message you might have seen popping up, or still popping up now, goes like this. Note, important message from Delhi police to all of India. For the next few weeks, do not drink any product of fruity, as a worker from the company has added his blood contaminated with HIV, AIDS. It was shown yesterday on NDTV. Please forward this message urgently to people you care about. Take care. Now there's NDTV again. Makes more sense in this case since this story originated in India. No worries, I know what he was going to say. He was going to say that it made more sense that NDTV was covering a story from India than North America since they were an Indian online television network. So, I lost all the sound from the end of this story. I can't get it back, so I'm just going to cut this story short. The bottom line is, it's not real, and that's the important thing. Okay, that's story number 1 out of the way. Now we're on story number 2. Now, this one is really interesting. The report is that a school of killer whales attacked and ate 16 crew members of a Japanese whaling boat. This story popped up in social media, got circulated around. Many people thought it was a real story, or maybe they just wished it was a real story. Not a lot of people like whalers and what they do. So let's get into the details of what they wrote. A Japanese whaling crew has fallen victim to a dramatic full-on assault by a school of killer whales, killing no less than 16 crew members. And I want to point out the grammar in this is absolutely atrocious. And injuring 12, has reported the Japanese government this morning. The crew of the MV Nishin Maru, I hope I pronounced that right, Japan's primary whaling vessel, it was their primary whaling vessel that got attacked, and the world's only whaler factory ship, was forced to leave the deck temporarily as a gas leak was detected within the ship's processing factory. That resulted in the ship being temporarily disabled, all while continuing to carry approximately 1,000 tons of oil. So many people saw this story on social media and they shared it. They just knee-jerk reaction. Oh, what? 16 whalers killed by killer whales? That's awesome. Share. And that's how this becomes almost real news. Again, people believe this and they share it around. When they see these clickbait titles, they share it and it almost becomes real news until you go and fact check it. And that's when you find out that the World News Daily Report is a spoof website. And they're just like The Onion. They post fake news stories and they even have a disclaimer on each article. And in this article, it's different than the last one. World News Daily Report is a news and political can't say the word satire apparently. I can't say publication either. Which may or may not use real names, often in semi-real or mostly fictitious ways. All news articles contained within worldnewsdailyreport.com are fiction and presumably fake news. Any resemblance to the truth is purely coincidental, except for all references to politicians and or celebrities, in which case they are based on real people, but still based almost entirely in fiction. Now the World News Daily Report counts on the fact that nobody's scrolling to the bottom of their article to read this. Most people are seeing the clickbait title and just sharing it around. And that's all the information they need to go on. So if you see this story floating around, ignore it, don't share it, post a link from this description in the comments so people know that it is fake news. Now that we've got that done, let's jump into story number 3. Alrighty, let's jump into the third story. This one is super important because it has to do with saving your own life during a heart attack through something called cough CPR. It's been going around the internet. I've seen it a few times recently, usually in a meme with very brief instructions. Cough CPR is a real thing, and it has to do with rhythmically coughing during a heart attack to increase your chances of survival. It essentially buys you more time, but it is a mixture of true and false, and you really can't believe the basic information that's provided in the memes you see floating around. Now what's amazing about this story is it's actually been around since 1999, and I had only recently heard about it in the last couple of years through the sharing of memes. It just goes to show you how these urban legends live through the years. Now this one's a little less of an urban legend because again, it's a mixture of true and false. Okay, I want to share with you the text from the original story that was shared via email in 1999. This is the one that's most truest to form to how cough CPR is actually performed. Bear with me, as this is a fairly long chunk of text, and I'm going to try and get through it as best I can and keep it as entertaining as possible. This one is serious. Let's say it's 4:17 p.m. and you're driving home, alone of course, after a usually hard day on the job. Not only was the workload extraordinarily heavy, you also had a disagreement with your boss. And no matter how hard you tried, he just wouldn't see your side of it. You're really upset, and the more you think about it, the more uptight you become. All of a sudden, you start to experience severe pain in your chest. It starts to radiate into your arm and up into your jaw. Wow, that was melodramatic. You're only about 5 miles from the hospital nearest your home. Unfortunately, you don't know if you'll be able to make it there in time. What can you do? You've been trained in CPR, but the guy that taught the course neglected to tell you how to perform CPR on yourself. How to survive a heart attack when alone. Since many people are alone when they suffer a heart attack, this article seemed in order. Without help, the person whose heart stops beating properly and who begins to feel faint has only about 10 seconds left before losing consciousness. However, these victims can help themselves by coughing repeatedly and vigorously. A deep breath should be taken before each cough, and the cough must be deep and prolonged, as when producing sputum or hork, gobbers, lung butter if you will. Wow, lung butter, that's gross. From deep inside the chest, a breath and a cough must be repeated about every 2 seconds without let up until help arrives or until the heart is felt to be beating normally again. Deep breaths get oxygen into the lungs, and coughing movements squeeze the heart and keep the blood circulating. So it's something like this. That was probably really loud, and I didn't get much sputum there. Would you think I would as a former smoker? But not really. The squeezing pressure on the heart also helps it regain normal rhythm. In this way, heart attack victims can get to a phone and between breaths call for help. I want to note that they said you have to do this every 2 seconds. You have to take a deep breath, cough. 2 seconds, deep breath, cough. And in between that, you need to get to a phone, dial, and let that person know what's going on. Can you imagine getting that phone call? I need help. I can't even imagine. Wow, I got a little bit lightheaded from that coughing myself. Tell as many other people as possible about this. It could save their lives. This comes from Healthcare's Rochester General Hospital via Chapter 240's newsletter, and the beat goes on. Reprint from the Mendon Hearts, Inc. publication, Heart Response. So that's how the story goes of how cough CPR is performed. Now that's probably the most detailed version of this story. More recent versions are again just a simple meme. Now the origins of this story come from a 1999 article, and there are some truths to it. There is a thing called cough CPR, and it can help increase the chances of surviving a heart attack. But it's only ever been practiced under supervision of a doctor and in study. From what I know and from reading this story, there's never been a case of cough CPR working outside those actual circumstances. I'm guessing that it might have worked for somebody, but that person would have been one of these people in the study who got the training and knew exactly what to do to save their lives. It wasn't from reading a 2-minute article in an email or in a meme and then just taking that without any practice or proper training. Just like real CPR, you need proper training to perform this properly, and there's not a lot of people teaching it. So the biggest problem with this article and the meme is that it has citation that makes it seem legitimate. And so if you're just reading the initial and then looking at the fact that it came from Rochester General Hospital with a link to the Rochester General Hospital original report, it really makes it seem legit and believable. But again, if you haven't had the proper training and you try this when having a heart attack, who knows what kind of effect it could have. You need proper training. I can't stress it enough. Since the original release of this information and the repeated circulation, Darla Bonham, who is Mended Heart's executive director, issued a statement about cough CPR. I received email from people all across the country wanting to know if it is a valid medically approved procedure. I contacted a scientist on staff with the American Heart Association Emergency Cardiac Care Division, and he was able to track a possible source of the information. The information comes from a professional textbook on emergency cardiac care. The procedure is also known as cough CPR and is used in emergency situations by professional staff. The American Heart Association does not recommend that the public use this method in a situation where there is no medical supervision. Getting back to the professionally trained CPR. So, without going through all the details, because there's a lot of doctors that have chimed in on this because of how legit it sounds, and there's even additional information if you want to read more about this. It's just way too much. I'll drag out the episode. I want to try and keep this stuff under the 15-minute mark. There's additional information in the Snopes article that you can find in the description below. Go and read this information if you're interested in cough CPR. There's stuff from the American Red Cross and the American Heart Association that explains this in more detail. All right, that's 1, 2, 3 stories done for episode 2. Let's head back over to the den and sum everything up. Okay, so you can pick that Pepsi you set down earlier in the episode back up. There's no HIV-infected blood in it. The whalers are alive and well. There's no pod of killer whales out seeking revenge for the death of their family. And cough CPR is a real thing, and it can save your life if you've had the proper training. Don't believe what you read in the memes circulating on social media. Don't forget to like this episode. Let me know what you thought of the show. Give me suggestions for future episodes. Or if you still hate my face and just want to let me know about it, do so in the comments below. Put your paws on that subscribe button so you get updates on when the next episode of What the Fox is released. Until next time, I'm the Fax Fox saying, Fox off.